We've got a full hour of Notre Dame football coming your way. Talk from Nathan Urbach. This should be a good time talking up the Irish, of course, with a trip to Tallahassee to open the 2021 campaign. And a couple commits recently coming into the fold. So check right in and settle back and take it in. Join us in the live chat. Leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics for Nathan and myself, and we talk up some Notre Dame football. Nathan, how's it going?
It's going well, Mark. It's going well. I know we've been talking about getting back together here over the last couple of weeks, and excited to get on, talk a little Notre Dame, and some exciting news moving forward.
So just a few people on the live chat right this second, but most of you will be watching the replay, so we want to get this out. First and foremost is that Nathan's going to host a post-game show for us on the Notre Dame channel that's also going to be simulcast most of the time either here or somewhere else. But anyway, it's going to be on the Notre Dame Voice of College Football channel. So keep that in mind. We're going to continue to I'll let you know about that scheduling. Again, Notre Dame and Florida State is, of course, week 1, and Notre Dame post-game right here at the Voice of College Football after every Irish game with Nathan. So that's exciting. You get to talk to the fans and chop it up after the ball games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, I recently just started a new podcast as well. So kind of getting that under my, getting that under the wing a little bit. And, I think that's going to help in regards to kind of hosting a show and different things like that. But no, I mean, I was a regular on your kind of post-game Notre Dame stuff in the past. So I think I have a pretty good feel of what you're looking for and, what Notre Dame fans might be looking for in general. So no, really excited to get that going and, on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Forget what I'm looking for, Nathan. Just those Notre Dame fans. That's all we care about. What do they want to talk about? But Nathan, of course, entrenched in Notre Dame football. If you haven't checked out his Twitter feed, it's just at Nathan Urbach, right?
Nathan_Urbach.
Nathan_Urbach. You see the spelling right there. And check out the Twitter handle. You'll see the Notre Dame passion and knowledge right there. And again, you've probably caught him a number of times here. I believe this is the 14th edition of our Notre Dame live show here. And please check out Nathan's podcast. You see it right there on the banner, Golden Homers Podcast. All right, let's get to the issues at hand, which is, of course, the all-important preseason poll, which actually is just fun to talk about, but it means nothing. Got to go out there and win the ball games. But as it stands right now, we had the coaches poll released last week, the AP poll released today. Notre Dame at number 7, Notre Dame at number 9, depending on your poll. I've actually got them confused in my head right now. I don't remember which one's 7 and which one is 9.
Yeah, I think in the AP they're 9. That's really the only one I've kind of paid attention to so far today.
Okay, the coaches poll came out last week, so they were number 7 in the coaches poll, and 9 in today's AP poll. So, your thoughts about the standing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about where I'd have it. I mean, just based off the last few years with their success, and I think right now with their floor being about 10 wins or so, I think that's kind of the standard that they've sort of set over the last 3 to 4 seasons. So, I don't think they're necessarily going to be a playoff team every year, but at least for this year's standards, I mean, a 7. If they finish 7 or 9, they wouldn't be a playoff team, and I think that's that's a pretty fair ranking, considering I think that they'll probably win 10 or so games. The one thing I actually found very interesting about the AP poll specifically, I don't have the coaches poll pulled up, or in the back of my head. I was sort of included in this, and I think a lot of Notre Dame fans felt this way, is that this schedule specifically was maybe going to be a little bit weaker than years past. But ironically enough, they have 4 teams that they play in the top 15 preseason. And obviously preseason rankings are just that, preseason, and a few of those teams might drop off, but also a few teams could maybe hop on. Maybe Florida State kind of gets their thing going a little bit better. Maybe Virginia Tech has a decent season. Those are a couple teams that I could see maybe being better. Maybe Stanford can sort of get things rolling here again a little bit as well and finish in the top 25. But having specifically Cincinnati, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and USC all in the top 15, to as a preseason or in the preseason poll. I think that's a pretty high standard.
Yeah, so Cincinnati right now at 8, North Carolina at 10 in the AP poll, Wisconsin at 12, and USC at 15. And those rankings are just about the same as they are in the coaches poll, as you can imagine, Nathan, even though you haven't checked out the coaches poll. I don't think there's a team. I think there are only 2 different teams in the top 25. And as you would expect, they're actually number 24 and 25. And everybody else is the same. And there's not a team that wonders more than 3 spots away in either poll. Wisconsin's 12 in one poll, they're 15 in another poll. For example, Cincinnati's 8, they're 10. North Carolina's 9 and 10. It is a difficult schedule. Notre Dame, obviously, with the ACC, I believe 5 opponents. It's been 5, it's been 6 in different years, something in that range. And then they fill it out, of course, with their traditional USC, Stanford, and otherwise. Is Navy on the schedule this year?
Always.
Okay. I thought so.
This isn't a Purdue-Michigan State situation.
Okay. I thought so. Did they even play last year? They didn't play last year, though, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
They were supposed to until the COVID situation.
I'm being nitpicky here. They were on the schedule. Yes.
You're right. I'm wrong in this situation.
Okay. The Wisconsin game, I know that they were scheduled to play at Lambeau last year, but that's going to be in Chicago, correct?
Yeah, and I forget what year it was, but they've rescheduled it for like 2025 or 2026, I think, for Lambeau. So it won't be back to back like it originally was, but it will. I think that will be continued.
So, I was prompted by a tweet just maybe a half hour to 45 minutes before we came on here, bragging up the ACC's position with 3 teams in the top 10. I'm counting 2, but they wanted to include Notre Dame as a member of the ACC. And so I did a little homework on non-conference records since 2017. I went back to I wanted to go 3 full seasons, and since hardly anybody played anyone non-conference in 2020, went back to 2017. The ACC is lagging way behind. Listen to these numbers, and I know this is a Notre Dame show, and we will get back to the Irish, but it plays into the ACC affiliation. And, of course, Notre Dame plays a national schedule unlike anybody else. So the SEC, to no surprise, is winning 56.6% of its non-conference games against the Power 5, 43 and 33. The Big Ten's number 2 at 547, so they're not far behind, 35 and 29. And then you've got the Big 12 is actually 27 and 25, 2 games over 500. The Pac-12 is 21 and 28. That's a 429 winning percentage. The ACC is at 268 winning percentage, 22 and 60. And Notre Dame's had something to do with that. The Irish have beaten up on the ACC pretty well.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd be curious to see what the percentage would be if you included Notre Dame in the ACC for those standards and just like took out all their ACC games, but against all the other Power 5 teams they have played. Probably wouldn't go up too well just because of the other Power 5 teams they play are typically, the Georgias of the world and, Michigan and teams like that. So it's not like they're winning all of those games, but I'm sure it would be at least a little bit higher than it is now.
Well, I played by the rules, and I took Notre Dame. Obviously, they're a non-conference team, so I counted their games, the ACC Notre Dame games, except for 2020. Notre Dame was a member of the ACC, so I did not count the ACC losses to Notre Dame in 2020. All right, number 7, number 9 in the country. I had a number of people call the other night when the coaches poll was released. Didn't really see Notre Dame as a top 10 team.
Yeah, no, it's weird. I mean, like I said earlier when we first hopped on, I mean, I know that the schedule was perceived to be kind of weak. Like I said, obviously now we see the 4 teams in the top 15 in pretty much both polls, like you mentioned. So it's probably going to be a fairly strong schedule like it usually is. But a lot of people have also considered this sort of a transition year for Notre Dame. But kind of like what I mentioned is for me, a transition year for Notre Dame has to be at least 10 wins at this point. And if they get to 10 wins, I think they're going to be a top 10 team or right around it. And I guess maybe it depends on who the two teams are that they lose to. If they lose to anybody outside of that top four that I just mentioned, then, maybe they fall to like 11 or 12 or 13 or something like that. But if they lose, if they lose, to Wisconsin and Chicago, which is, I know it's technically a home game for Notre Dame, but it's, it's neutral site, and then maybe lose to one of those other two teams, but then, beat the other two and then dominate the rest of their schedule for the most part, then I think you got to probably have them in the top 10. But yeah, no, I mean, new quarterback, but an experienced quarterback. Jack Coan actually was just named the starter. That's played at Wisconsin, so I don't know who I'd give the edge there, Notre Dame or Wisconsin, in that reunion. But I will say I would give the edge to Notre Dame against Cincinnati with Marcus Freeman coming over from Cincinnati. Just because of how talented I think he is going to be as a defensive coordinator and a recruiter. So those are two games that I think are very appealing just because of who's with Notre Dame now. But yeah, no, overall, I mean, I think anywhere from like that 7 to 10 ranking for Notre Dame seems pretty fair.
So, Byers, the big announcement is that Nathan's going to be hosting our post-game show for Notre Dame football. So after every Notre Dame game over on the Notre Dame channel, and we're going to find a place most likely here on the main channel to simulcast that, Nathan's going to be hosting our Notre Dame post-game show. So we're excited about that. All right, the other thing in this, Nathan, your Irish could really help me out here in regards to chaos. Want chaos, want the committee to have as difficult a situation as possible. A Notre Dame undefeated team like we've seen in 2018, obviously they did slip up in the ACC championship game last year, though. With this schedule, they should be an automatic for the playoff. I think 11-1 with that dicey evaluation of, well, Notre Dame didn't play in a conference championship game. All these other teams are playing in conference championship games against this schedule, considering USC, Wisconsin, and North Carolina are all favorites, not necessarily to win their conferences, but to play in the conference championship game. And then Cincinnati, of course, is a huge wild card in all this. They play Notre Dame and Indiana back-to-back, and they've got an opportunity to really make some noise if they win those games. And those teams, Indiana and Notre Dame, go on to what we would expect them to do. So I think I'm rooting for Notre Dame to lose to Cincinnati and beat all the Power Fives that are that highly ranked. And I want all those teams to have the type seasons we would expect, 9-3, 10-2 kind of years. And those ought to be really good wins. And that would maybe wreak some havoc.
Yeah, no, of course. And I'm pretty sure Notre Dame plays Cincinnati at home. And that, and if that happens, like, let's say Notre Dame goes 11-1, like you're predicting in this scenario, that would be the first. They would have one loss, obviously, but that'd also be the first time they've lost at home in, I think, almost 30 games. They even beat Clemson last year. I mean, albeit without Trevor Lawrence, I get that. At home, they pretty much have dominated at home over the last, 3-4 seasons.
Are you obligated to say that, Nathan, every time you mention that Notre Dame beat Clemson last year? You have to put the disclaimer in there about Trevor Lawrence.
I feel like it because every time I say without it, I get someone commenting that they didn't
like the game didn't count or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Clemson is a pretty good football team without Trevor Lawrence. Anyway, Notre Dame's got a pretty good recruiting situation going on here for 2022. Right now, I didn't realize that they had risen to number 2 in the country, and I'm sure that's bolstered by the 21 hard commits, which might be slightly higher than a lot of teams that they're competing against, but not a lot. So this is a strong class, and a couple recent guys made their commitments.
Yeah, I mean, they were dominating on the defensive side of the football for a while, and Marcus Freeman's kind of, really bolstered the defensive recruiting in general. Overall, along with Mike Elson, their defensive line coach, are like 2 of the best recruiters in the country overall, and the guys that they land typically end up even proving those rankings correct, I should say. But a couple of the guys they've landed here in the 2022 class recently. CJ Williams out of California, Mater Dei Catholic. That's usually a USC feeder school. I believe JT Daniels, Amon-Ra St. Brown, both kids that had Notre Dame offers, who thought, many people thought Notre Dame had a decent chance with at one point. Both ended up going to USC out of that school. He goes to Notre Dame, top 100 wide receiver. And then Tobias Merriweather out of the same area of the country. I mean, Pacific Northwest, I should say, is out of the Washington area. That was a big time get as well. He's another top 100 recruit at wide receiver specifically. And, it's a huge boost to the offensive side after, the defensive class has kind of been dominating, or at least the 2022 cycle overall. And then yesterday, they picked up a 2023 safety commit and a Don Schuler out of New Jersey. He was down to pretty much Notre Dame and Penn State. Maryland was thrown in there as well. And he's a top 200 kid right now on 24/7 Sports at the safety position. And, right now that class, I think, is ranked 2 or 3 as well, with 3 really nice defensive commits so far.
Yeah. So trying to track the last player you just mentioned was Nolan Ziegler, right? The linebacker.
No, Nolan Ziegler's actually been in the class for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Don Schuler, he was actually a 2023 commit.
Okay. That's why I couldn't find him.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So getting back to CJ Williams. Yeah, Mater Dei High School, 6'2", 193. Number 86 in the composite. That's overall. Number 11 in his position, 7th rated in the state of California. So that's way up there. So Notre Dame, 21 hard commits in the 22 class. Okay, number 2 ranked in the country.
And I think the biggest thing right now with the recruiting class, outside of the numbers, I mean, they do, like you mentioned, they do have 21 commits. Compared to like Alabama and Ohio State, for example, who are ranked lower than them at the moment. I mean, I think they have like 14 or so commits respectively. The biggest thing I like about this recruiting class is the player rating. Notre Dame usually hovers around that 89 to 90 player rating. And right now they're actually closer to probably being a 92 rating, which is a legitimate like top 200 guy. If you wanted to kind of put an estimate on it. And that's something that, for closing the gap, I guess, against these teams like Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, that player rating, regardless of how many kids they have in the class, needs to be closer to that number than the 89, 90 range that they're typically at.
So this is something we talked about with you, Nathan, ever since the first time we had you on, closing the gap. And this is that kind of class, the way it shapes up right now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's eliminated the gap. But it, like I said, in my opinion, if they can put together, 3-4 of these types of classes in a row, I mean, you're looking at a program that, especially when these guys are upperclassmen, I think can compete with the Alabamas, Clemsons, and Ohio States of the world. I was actually and I'll shout out my new podcast here again with my buddy Mason Plummer, who's follow him as well. He's a great Notre Dame
right, Mason.
Twitter follow.
Sure.
And he's been on here as well. Notre Dame's never going to land the 3 or 4 ready-made 5-star guys like Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson do on a pretty much annual basis. But what they've proven is when they can land those guys, the Kyle Hamiltons, the Michael Mayers, the Michael Floyds, Jalen Smith, Manti Te'o, just to kind of name a few guys that have come in as freshmen and been studs. When they land those guys, they do play early on. And they can play early on, like when I say like starters as freshmen, which Notre Dame's not really known for. They don't usually start too many guys or have a prominent guy as a freshman. But when they do land those guys, they play early on. But if they can consistently land the Chase Claypools of the world, the guys that are probably 5-star talents, just are a little bit more raw coming out of the high school ranks, for one reason or another, then by the time they're juniors or seniors, you're looking at a roster that has much more talent than maybe people realize that they're just looking at recruiting rankings. The Will Fuller is another good example of that. I mean, both those guys, were first, second round picks in the NFL draft. They both have been really good NFL players when healthy, and they were dominant college football players, by the time they were juniors and seniors. And I think in Will Fuller's case, actually, as a sophomore, he was a really good player. So while they're not necessarily landing Jalen Smith and Manti Te'o every year, they do have the capability of landing the guys that can turn into those players once they are in the system, they're in the weight room, they're in a college system for 1 to 2 years. And I think that that's what they're getting a lot better at, is landing more of those guys than maybe like the players rated in the 500-600 range that maybe even take longer to develop or don't have the ceiling that some of these other guys have.
Got Nathan Erbach right here. You see his new podcast on the banner right there, Golden Homers Podcast. Who can we blame for that title?
So that's a funny one. I'll be honest with you. We kind of did it as a pun or a play on words of sorts. Like I said, me and my co-host Mason Plummer, the podcast is not just centralized around Notre Dame talk. A lot of our Notre Dame, or a lot of our followers are Notre Dame based. So that's going to be a big part of the podcast, but he's a big White Sox fan. I'm a big Cubs fan. So Homer sort of led to being obviously Notre Dame homers to an extent, and more kind of as a joke, but then also, homers obviously with the baseball reference there. That we kind of went back and forth for months, because we had been talking about doing this podcast for probably the last couple of years, and finally our schedules matched up enough to do it. But it just we thought it rolled off the tongue a little bit. And with so many Notre Dame podcasts and just so many podcasts in general out there these days, it's hard to find one that can stick.
That is like a double pun you got going there. At least a double pun with, of course, the Golden Domers, the baseball, the homers, and then your teams are involved. So your homers, you got all sorts of angles covered there. And Nathan doesn't want to name the postgame show for Notre Dame. And I think you've pretty much iced it right now that you need to come up with a name.
Fair enough. I'll think about it over the next couple of weeks.
Because you're much better, obviously, at that than I am. As you can see right now, we just call this Notre Dame Fighting Irish Live. Bam, there you go. Miami Hurricanes Live. That's pretty much, we just cut to the heart of it.
If it was a morning post-game show, I would just say call it tea and crumpets and get out of the way.
Okay. Well, unless they play about 18 overtimes against Florida State, I don't think it's going to be. But I believe that game's on – is that a Sunday night game?
I believe it is. Yeah, September 5th. September 5th.
Sunday night game. So Nathan's going to be hosting our post-game coverage throughout the season, but starting out with Florida State and Tallahassee, it's a night game on that Sunday night. So we will be pumping that up and letting you know exactly where to find that. But it's on the Notre Dame channel, Voice of College Football. We've got about 500 subs there, so you guys can wink, wink, wink. If you get that over 1,000, that helps me a lot. 1,000. And then, like I tell everyone, Nathan, hey, if you don't like that team, just give me over 1,000, then you can drop the subs later. That's fine. You can once we get to a safe like 1,200, then you can leave. That's fine. We'll take it from there. All right, Nathan, I'm looking at this defense, and I see where the team was 4th in the nation in havoc rate. Disrupting play. I shouldn't say that. That would be misleading, but I'm sure they are high in havoc rate. But this is somewhat different. Basically, tackles for loss, plays behind the line of scrimmage, 4th in the nation. Do we expect the defense to be that disrupted this year?
They did lose a lot. Adi Ogundeji and Dalen Hayes were their two main pass rushers off the edge. They have a really young pass rushing core right now that I think has potential, but I don't think the pass rushing ability is going to be quite there this year. Obviously when you have a guy like Kyle Hamilton roaming around the backfield or roaming around the back part of the defense, he's probably going to be a top 5, top 10 pick in the NFL. That helps solve a lot of issues overall. And I think that they probably have one of the more steady linebacker cores in the country. It's old. They did lose Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, but overall, they've brought in so much talent at that position. And like I said, the guys that are returning have all been there for, 2-3 years now. I don't know if I necessarily see the defense being as dominant as it was last year. But I think that's also where maybe someone like Marcus Freeman can come in and close that gap a little bit. I love Clark Lee for what he was. He was a tremendous coach, and I think he's going to do pretty well at Vanderbilt, considering sort of the limitations he's going to have as a head coach there. But Marcus Freeman's defense is going to create more havoc in the sense that they're going to be blitzing more. They're going to be, I think they're going to disguise some plays a little bit more, and they're just going to be a little bit more aggressive. While Clark Lee was more of a bend but don't break defense.
So basically, I wasn't lying. I was telling the truth. Pretty much havoc rate is basically tackles for loss, sacks, and then disrupted plays like pass breakups, balls batted at the line, and obviously turnovers. So it's almost tackles for loss is going to be like 80% of that anyway. So Notre Dame was 4th in the nation in tackles for loss and 5th in havoc rate. It's right here, 21%. Tons of pass breakups, 49 pass breakups. And then that all ties into this stat. They were 3rd best in the nation in 3rd down yardage to go, meaning that they succeeded on 1st and 2nd down of limiting the yardage, putting teams in 3rd and long at 3rd and 8+. So that kind of goes hand in hand with all of that. Are you a bit lukewarm, marginal on seeing Jack Coan in a Notre Dame uniform for the first time, thinking pretty much we know what he is, or are you excited, expecting possibly better?
It's interesting. I remember when they landed him, I don't know if I was necessarily through the roof about the transfer in general. But I do think overall he's a really just reliable quarterback. I don't think he was necessarily showcased as much as he could have been showcased at Wisconsin. I mean, they had Jonathan Taylor pretty much his entire, his entire starting tenure there, and obviously great offensive line play. So very similar to Notre Dame, probably with just like maybe a little bit lack of talent, or a little bit less talent than Notre Dame, just generates on a yearly basis. But no, I mean, I think he's a little bit more mobile than given credit for. I think he's going to be able to push the. Strain the defense a little bit more from a down the field standpoint. I think he has a stronger arm than Book, or at least more accurate when it comes to down the field passing. Book was great at, picking up chunk yards on the ground, and really just being like sort of a game manager of sorts. I know that's sort of a label that people don't love, but I think he was terrific in that regard. The short to intermediate passing game he was really good at. And I think Jack Coan can maybe, like I said, push the envelope a little bit more from downfield passing. And if the guys at wide receiver can stay on the field and stay healthy.
Seems like most of your Notre Dame folks in the live chat are comfortable with 10-2 as the basement, just like you stated out of the gate, even though somebody said not necessarily that they were predicting 7-5, but they had seen as low as 7-5 out there. I just can't imagine that. But Cheryl, thank you so much for a number of times letting everybody know that, yeah, we got Notre Dame post-game coming up featuring Nathan. And basically it's going to be the same deal as what we do here. He's just going to give his take on the game, his analysis, may bring in some folks to talk Notre Dame football with him, and obviously keep his eye on the live chat to respond to your comments and questions. So get in there and, of course, support Nathan and what we're doing with Notre Dame football. There's our run of post-game shows, and under the bar right there is actually LSU. So I don't even know if I'm going to add to this, because I think this is about as much as I can possibly handle at this point. I don't think we're going to try to add too many more, but we're excited about all those coming up throughout the SEC and really all the Power 5 conferences on down the line. The reason you see an SEC logo is we're going to do an SEC kind of wrap-up show, actually a kind of a preview of the weekend show on Thursday, and then a wrap-up show on Saturday, and also on Sunday. We've got somebody in place to do that for us, so we're excited about all of those. Nathan, for a lot of people, college football overlaps so many games on Saturday that everybody's locked in on their team, and then they may see a big national game, and that might be it for the weekend. Notre Dame's going to be by themselves with Florida State on the national stage on Sunday night. You know, is there anyone that I ask you this all the time because I love to dive into new personnel, but you know, players that may be a little bit under the surface, but that you're looking forward to, and everybody else should.
Yeah, I mean, they have Cam Hart is a guy that I'm really looking at. He should be starting opposite of Clarence Lewis at cornerback for Notre Dame. He was actually a kid that was recruited to play wide receiver, but there was always some rumors that he could maybe switch to the cornerback position. Think he's a guy to really look at. Couple other guys, you know, like I said, they did lose their top 2 pass rushers from last year, but Isaiah Foskey, who's been here for, you know, he's going into his 3rd season, and Jordan Patello, who was actually my top ranked player that Notre Dame landed a couple years back in their recruiting class. Those are some guys that can maybe, you know, cause some havoc in the backfield as guys that are maybe more naturally talented at pass rushing, but maybe just aren't fully there yet in regards to, you know, those other guys were, you know, fifth year guys and had been in the program, been in the weight room for a long time. So those are definitely a few guys. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, Kevin Austin's been a guy that's been talked about at nauseum at Notre Dame. He's had a hard time staying on the field. But, you know, even the reports this year after, you know, coming back from a pretty tough injury is that he looks great. And that he's like pretty much by far their best offensive weapon, at least on the outside. So if he can stay healthy and you know, and help, you know, Michael Mayer in the passing game, and then guys like Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree can do their thing in the backfield, you know, it's going to be a really big asset to the team if Kevin Austin can stay healthy overall. So those are a few guys I'm definitely looking at.
All right, folks, our aim today was to announce our Notre Dame post-game show with Nathan. Please join him on his podcast as well. So again, that's 2 things. Nathan's podcast right there, Golden Homers podcast. So the puns are just loaded and just into that entire show description there. And then also Nathan with the Notre Dame postgame coverage on our postgame show on the Notre Dame channel. And you guys are going to have to get used to every week. I'm going to be like rolling out a postgame show schedule. So you're going to have to keep track of times and dates and locations and all that other stuff on our 22 or 23 channels. I've lost track at this point. We just added Iowa and Virginia Tech. So we'll just keep it going. But Nathan, I appreciate you heading up this post-game show, and good luck on your podcast. You may have mentioned this before. I apologize if I missed it. Have you cut an episode yet?
Yeah, so our first episode came out this past Saturday. Right now, we're still working towards getting it to like Apple Podcasts. I think right now the biggest one it's on is Spotify. So if you have Spotify or Google Play, it's actually on both of those at the moment. So yeah, no, it's going to be coming out on Apple Podcasts here probably within the next couple of days. Looking to probably put out a podcast a week. So you can look for that probably closer to the weekend here again. And yeah. No, so like I said, Notre Dame. It's going to be Notre Dame heavy, but also if you're a big baseball guy, me and my co-host Mason Plummer, White Sox, Cubs are going to be a big topic of discussion. We're going to talk fantasy football a little bit, you know, NFL football. Pretty much, we'll throw in a few topics here and there about you know, all of the different things that we do enjoy, and it's going to be heavy banter based. It's not going to be something that we're looking at as being super professional, I guess, if that makes sense. You know, not a lot of like cursing or anything like that, but it's just going to be 2 friends kind of going back and forth, maybe drinking some beers while we discuss some different things. And it's just a way for us to maybe get you know, kind of get the stress out of a long work week and just talk some, you know, some sports that we enjoy. So that's really the big thing behind it.
So Nathan, from that comment, I'm guessing that you're holding our little channel here to some kind of professional standard.
Yeah, and that might have been the wrong word. I don't mean it's not going to be unprofessional per se, but it's definitely going to be more banter based than it is going to be.
Yeah, that's cool.
Than it is going to be just like getting news out there based, if that makes sense.
And fortunately, from a programming standpoint, I guess, but unfortunately, from a fan standpoint, you're not going to have to make any tough decisions concerning Notre Dame football versus Major League Baseball playoff game involving the Cubs this season. None of those are going to overlap.
Yeah, unfortunately, to say the least.
Okay. Nathan Erbach, one more time here with Golden Homers Podcast, also hosting our Notre Dame post-game show each and every week on the Notre Dame channel, and we will supply that somewhere else as well each and every week. Nathan, appreciate you stopping by as always, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, everyone. I believe that should do it right there for another live edition here. We talked Notre Dame the last hour. And also had a live stream earlier today. As no, I am not Nathan Erbach. I will correct that in just a second. But another live stream today once the AP Top 25 preseason poll was released. So we hope you were able to check that out. It's caused me to really go through some metrics here that I might be producing some videos on. I just went through the last 4 football seasons to determine who had the non-conference records versus the Power 5, meaning the ACC versus the Big 10 versus the SEC, the Pac-12, and the Big 12. That could be quite interesting. Also, I've got some other videos to cut. Plenty of predictions to do as well. Appreciate everybody being here. Let me give it one more gander if anybody's got any comments or questions. And Cheryl, thank you so much for letting everyone know. We've got a Notre Dame post that's going to be on the Notre Dame channel. So head on over there and please subscribe. Push us over 1,000 on the Notre Dame channel. Any of the channels that you see us less than 1,000, we could use your help to get us past 1,000, but especially that the Notre Dame, Alabama, and USC channels are the closest. They're all in that 500 to 600 range. So we could use a boost on Alabama, Notre Dame, and USC in particular. Appreciate everyone. The Rod Farva, probably not a show tonight. I got a lot of work to do. I got to play some catch up around here regarding the channel and the business side of it, and trying to get some initiatives going right here. Michael, I saw your comment about Purdue post game. We will get there someday, my friend. We will get there someday. That's man. Once we get to Purdue on the network, then yes, I'm all for it. Would love it. But, let's this is about all I can handle at this point. And so no, I'm not going to be hosting any of these post game shows. I'm going to be right here. And if we add too many post-game shows, nobody's going to watch me. Nobody's going to be talking college football with me on Saturday. Everybody's going to be off on some other post-game show. But that's good. If that's actually what's happening, I'm good with that. All right. The Rod Farva, Michael, Cheryl, Roberto, whomever else was on here. D-Rock Irish, thank you so much for supporting. I see regular tweets going out and people sharing on Twitter. I appreciate that so much, even if it brings in one person. If it brings in one person, then that person joins in and maybe they grab 30 people. Who knows? But we have our mission here. And I believe you guys are the core that understand what we're trying to do here at the Voice of College Football. And that's talk college football with all of you in a way that's meaningful, understandable, great discussion, debate, analysis, fun, laid back. We don't take it too seriously. We take it seriously because we love the football, but we don't take it too seriously. It's not life. It's not real life. So we have a good time and engage with all of you. And we think we apply a little knowledge and a little thought to the arguments concerning what's going on the field. And of course, what's amazing is that in 2 weeks, we're actually going to have fresh football to talk about right here, the Voice of College Football. I will see everybody next time, unless some kind of news story breaks. Next time up will be tomorrow, Tuesday at 1 Eastern on the Miami channel, Miami Live, and then at 8 Eastern on the Nebraska channel. So Miami Live at 1, Nebraska Live at 8 Eastern on Tuesday. See ya. Thank you.